Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 16th and tonight's movie is Last Shift. The 16th is like the Horror Nights hump day. We're halfway done. This is the midpoint. Anyway, Last Shift is a 2014 horror movie about a rookie cop who is being assigned the last shift. And at first I was like, I don't know about last shift because that would imply that the police close. But from the trailer, it looks like this is like they're moving to a different station and this is like the old one and she's just there keeping watch. But the problem is that this is like also a mausoleum or something, and there was a lot of shady business that went down there. Some like satanic business. There's pentagrams, there's mutilated dead bodies, there's a bunch of women sitting around in circles, and there's this grubby, oily looking guy who it appears to be at the center of all of it. There was one scare in the trailer that I thought was really cool. It was like her closing her locker, and then the next shot is like a zoomed out shot, and suddenly every other locker in the room is open. This movie does have a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but that was from 9 reviews, so take that with a grain of salt. Its audience reviews and IMDb scores are not as impressive, so I don't really know what to expect. The only way to find out is to give it a watch. I wasn't really expecting much, but that was fantastic. I'm giving Last Shift a 9 out of 10. The horror elements in this movie are the best of this month so far. Hereditary is still the scariest movie I've ever seen, but if this isn't the second scariest, it's definitely in the top 5. It's all very honest, too. There are no cheap jump scares or obnoxious scoring. Like, if you want to get scared this Halloween, this isn't a bad movie to watch. Anyway, the leading actress is Juliana Harkavy. I have no idea how you pronounce her name, and she does a very good job. She's an engaging actress. She was able to hold a lot of this movie on her own. Her character, named Jess, was also very well written. This movie is sort of like Cube in the fact that it doesn't leave its location at all. It starts out with her in her car, about to walk into the station, and it stays in the station the whole time. This movie is called Last Shift because this is the last shift anyone's going to have at this police station. They're almost completely done moving to a new one, but they just have one last night. There are not even going to be any 911 calls being directed there. She just has to stay there, keep watch, let a hazmat team in at some point of the night, and that's it. But it doesn't take long for some spoopy things to start happening. The locker room scene I was talking about in the beginning, that was in this movie, and that was done very well. It's so eerie because you don't see or hear a single door open, but then it pans out and suddenly every locker in the room is open, even though I think they're all supposed to be locked. Some of the scares in this movie were so creative and clever, I actually laughed. One that was really simple but very effective is she finds a homeless man just walking around, he pees on the floor, and she has to put him into custody because he doesn't leave when he asks her to leave, like multiple times. And when they're both in the holding cell, the lights go out, the door closes on its own, and there's a point where she drops her flashlight, and then she sees the flashlight turn on. She's like, okay, give it back to me. And like, she's telling the homeless man, give it back to me, I need my flashlight. But then the flashlight moves over and shines on the homeless person. So that means that somehow a third person is in the room. This movie is a lot like Hereditary, where it seems in every single scene they come up with some new creative way to freak you out. It also reminds me a lot of movies like 1408, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, Oculus, where it's a lot of psychological warfare against the main character or main characters. And while Jess seems very strong-willed and dependable, this is out of her job description. There were several points in the movie where I was like, okay, this is where you leave. And she doesn't. I think it's a pride sort of thing, or like wanting to prove herself because it's her first day, and I guess she doesn't want to call for help on her first day, but there are some points where no one would have blamed her for just cutting her losses and leaving. The source of all this paranormal activity seems to involve this family of Backwood Hicks doing what families of Backwood Hicks do in horror movies, which is kill people. But they don't just kill people, they're also like a demonic cult. And these people are a special kind of crazy. Like, the scenes where they're in, like, you can tell the actors are having a blast. The only real critique I have for this movie is I didn't love the ending. I mean, it's not bad, but I don't think it was optimized. And considering how creative the rest of the movie was, it was an ending I've seen before in a lot of other movies. But the rest of this movie is like S tier horror. If you're sick of bad CGI and jump scares in modern horror movies, I would say check this out. This is a very well done scary movie. And now we got some spoilers. One of the reasons, I guess, why Jess wanted to be a police officer is because her dad was a police officer and he died in the line of duty. And what got him killed was like the raid of this family. There's this other police officer who comes in to check on her, but before that was one of my favorite scares in the movie where like she hears like things falling over. She hears weird noises like the entire movie, but she goes and then she sees like a break room and there's like a bunch of chairs and they're all on the ground. And then she hears something else and then she turns to see it and she doesn't see anything. So she goes back and looks at the room and all the chairs are like stacked into like a pile. Oddly enough, for some reason, that makes her think that people are pulling a prank on her, which I would love to know how that's possible. But anyway, she talks with this other guy, and he was there for the raid, and he told her about her dad's death. But then, when he turns around and leaves, there's a bullet wound in the back of his head. And it just keeps getting worse. Cult members, both dead and alive, terrorize Jess. And there comes a point where she actually does try to make a break for it, but the door locked itself, and she tried firing bullets at the glass, and the bullets, like, vanished. The spirits do a lot of things to mess with her head. One thing they did was that when she was calling, she got a response from someone else, but he was, like, really mean about it. He was like, "Are you on fire? Are you dying? Do you need help just because you think you're seeing things in a scary building? Do you want to just resign right now?" And it's like, I don't think any police officer should talk like that. So I was thinking that was probably the spirits messing with her. And there was also a point where she gets a phone call from her dad, who is dead, and like it's him, and they talk, and he like says, "You need to avenge my death," which I'm gonna guess that the dad would not want to do that if it meant that she would probably die. Anyway, the climax of this movie is very well done. It's like one really long take of her like going around the place shooting cultists, and it made me think of like a video game, like a shooter. But then the ultimate twist when she's at the last guy, suddenly there's like a click and then everything changes. Like the police officer who she met at the very beginning of the movie comes in and shoots her because she wasn't going around shooting cultists. She was shooting the hazmat team that was supposed to come. It's a lot like the endings of Oculus or the Autopsy of Jane Doe, where like they think that they finally won and then they didn't. And as she lay there dying, bleeding out, she sees the cult members, the ghosts of the cult members, like walk up. And I think they like put a bag over her head because that was like a motif. A lot of them had bags over their heads. And the movie ends pretty abruptly. I wasn't totally here for the ending. I felt like they could have done something different, but it wasn't bad. And it certainly wasn't enough to detract from how well done the rest of the movie was. The acting was great, the direction was great, the scares were like top notch. It didn't have the amazing character development and feel-good happy ending of A Quiet Place Part 2, but it did what it set out to do, and it did that very well. This kind of falls into the hidden gem category. I think more people should be talking about Last Shift. Okay, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.